All right, Ethan Skolnick here after the Miami Heat win 111-98 here at American Airlines Arena. You can see behind me there are no fans leaving. The corridors are empty. Alex Toledo's inside. He's on the Zoom calls. We'll be doing a podcast later. I got Ricky J. Mark. Others are going to be joining me here as well. Basically, a few things to get through here. One, Jimmy Butler didn't play the second half because he aggravated his ankle, but he'll have 3 days off before the next game. Duncan Robinson carried the offense in the first half. Goran Dragic primarily in the second half. But, Ricky, to me, the big thing in this game, it was pretty clear the Heat were bogged down offensively in the fourth quarter, couldn't create much. Hero wasn't in there for a lot of it and had struggled throughout much of the game. Bam wasn't looking at the baskets. It was all on Goran. But defensively, man, like Avery Bradley's debut and Avery Bradley, Andre Iguodala, hands in every single driving lane. And then the other thing to get to, Precious Achiuwa closed the game instead of Bam and had 11 points, but more than that, just clamped Brandon Ingram several times and Zion down the stretch, taking him by himself. They're closing games here with a rookie who didn't play in Summer League, didn't have an NCAA tournament, didn't have a conference tournament. Like, to me, and watching him in person, man, is different. He's like Bam. He doesn't stop moving. But I will tell you, he's more skilled than Bam was as a rookie. What did you take away from their defense today?
So here's the thing. Watching the Heat play and pretty much close out the fourth quarter, I was able to watch them win a game that great teams are actually supposed to win. This is the kind of win that you hope a team that makes deep playoff runs win. When the offense, there are going to be nights throughout the season when the offense isn't going to be running the way it should. Shots aren't going down for whatever reason. However, the way we were able to see Precious, Avery Bradley, and those guys pretty much make JJ Redick's life a living nightmare, that is the difference between a good team and a great team when it really matters. And it's very encouraging to see that kind of performance this early in the season, especially after what we saw in Orlando the other night.
Yeah, and especially, look, I think the Pelicans ended up with 13 points in the fourth quarter in total, which is pretty remarkable. Alex is going to be joining us here from his seat if he can jump on there. But, yeah, I mean, when you take Alex and I were talking about this during the game, offensively, again, with Hero struggling, and they got to let him play through it a little bit, and then Jimmy goes out, like all of the ball handling fell on Dragic. There was a certain point I didn't think they were going to get to 100 points today in that fourth quarter because there was no movement, there was no creation. Duncan, they were trying to force things to Duncan a little bit, but you can see now they are always going to have two or three elite defenders on the floor at the same time, and they did today. Again, Bradley's defense, you mentioned on Redick, he took Redick completely out of the game. Now, offensively, Bradley and Iguodala are a bit of an adventure. You don't want them to dribble, okay? But defensively, what they gave them today was remarkable, and you can see, again, the Bradley acquisition. Alex just kept looking at me say, look how big Avery Bradley's hands are, right? Like, that's what you see.
I said it like 5 times.
I mean, that's the thing. I mean, he creates so much havoc between him and Iguodala. When we talk about length defensively, you talk about arm length, right? Like that was the big thing with Hero. Has short arms. But both of those guys have huge hands, and it's just between the two of them and now Precious or Bam. The other thing I want to get to, Alex, the starting lineup I thought worked. I know they got off to a slow start, but I thought playing Myers Leonard at least set the tone. The big thing I took away from Myers today is Myers' release on his threes is much quicker. He talked about that, but he had 3 threes. It's not that he made them, although that gave him the space. It was that he got those shots off. And last year, he had trouble getting those shots off.
Got off multiple shots and, not that much time, like in a kind of similar stints that he was getting last year. He just, the windup isn't so long. And I think that was really frustrating watching him last year. And that was, I think, one of the big changes between putting him in the lineup and Jay Crowder, whereas Crowder was just getting those shots off quicker. They were able to kind of move faster. And so I think it's a positive development. When you put that out, I started noticing, and it's true. Like, he's getting the shots off quicker, and everything we said about it, Avery and Iguodala, man, I was so impressed by their defense. Turning defense into offense. I think that's kind of their value right now on the offensive end, than just being like basic ball movers and below average shooters. They can really turn defense into offense. That's not something they really had last year when you think about it. So I think Spo clearly saw the defense was kind of an issue last game, and they had a lot more defensive intensity this time around.
Well, the other thing is too, and I know people were upset that KZ didn't get in, but Harkless played. But Harkless had 3 or 4 really strong defensive possessions during a time when they needed. I thought he gave them just enough. Again, a little bit of an adventure offensively with all these guys. Jonathan Ramlikan joins us as well. But, I think when you look at I think Eric is just going to be looking. Eric now 8-0 in Christmas Day games. I think he's just game to game. I do think it's going to be matchup specific. But I think the things we've seen through the first couple games are, Hero's going to be the starter. He's going to let him play through it. I don't think you can put Avery Bradley as a starter because he's not a shot creator in any way, and they need another shot creator in the starting lineup if Dragic is coming off the bench. But I think a couple things we've seen. Precious is in this thing for the long haul now. Okay, Precious is in this thing for the long haul. Precious is going to be in the rotation for the entire season. There's no question about that. Obviously, Dragic's legs look great through the first 2 games. He looks explosive to me. He doesn't look like he's missed anything from last year. Tyler Hero looks like he's thinking too much. I think, again, he just needs one breakout game. I think he'll be okay. Duncan's finding the spots. But, again, today, no Olynyk. I think the Olynyk thing's game to game. But I think Avery Bradley has, as we expected, passed Kendrick Nunn. And I don't know that Kendrick's going to get a whole lot of run unless they need guard scoring or Dragic is out. Jonathan, what did you take from today?
It was just a good team effort overall, especially since we lost Jimmy for most of the game in the second half. We saw that we kind of hit that lull where we slumped down and we couldn't find anything, and Goran saved us. And this was a game, I think Goran was like the Christmas treat of this game because he pulled out some nice spin moves. He pulled out the behind the back. So it was really fun just watching Goran play and take things in the second half. But overall, I really like the defense. Bradley really impressed me. It reminded me of that Toronto game last year when we had Winslow, Bam, and Jimmy all playing. But except we had Avery, Iguodala, and Precious doing the same things and shutting teams down. So we had a lot of really good defensive moments. I feel like Precious just really showed out on the defensive end. A little bit of ticky-tack calls against Zion, but he showed that he can handle a big that has the speed as well. So just a lot of good takeaways from this game, honestly.
Well, the other thing about it, Alex, we discussed this. We'll get into this a little bit more on the pod. But the idea that you don't have Jimmy and yet you still close the game without Bam, pretty much, there at the end. I mean, they stayed with Precious. I know that you pulled away a little bit, but not by so much. You have Hero not going well. You have no Jimmy. You don't play Bam down the stretch. So you really didn't get from those 3 guys what you anticipate that you're going to get this season. And you still beat a team that I think could make the playoff. We talked about it. They need to tweak a couple things. They need an extra big off the bench. But a team that
they need to start JJ Redick.
Western Conference, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I think it is pretty good. I like their effort today. Like even Mo Harkless, I thought had a good effort out there. Was pretty solid on defense. Even in those couple minutes that he had on Zion, like there was a couple times where he planted there in the paint, and just like the first game, Zion was seeing help every time he got the ball, and guys were just completely selling out on their defensive assignments. And because the Pelicans frankly don't have any shooters outside of JJ Redick. But I thought it was a really good effort. Like we saw just a really turned up defensive intensity this time around that I didn't think we saw really in the first game at all. And it is a good team. Like they have a lot of competent players, and you look at the Pelicans' actual rotation; they're playing more vets than young guys. So it's pretty interesting. Like they have the makeup of a kind of a lower level playoff team. I think they're going to be just outside in the playing game. But again, I'm going to say it was disrespectful to give the Heat the Pelicans on Christmas Day and the early slate. And I'm only saying that because I had to get up early for this. But but it's true. They should have got prime time. Like they, not really the same level to me.
Well, and then there was advertised, instead of being Zion against Jimmy, it was advertised as Zion against the Heat because they couldn't even mention a specific player in the Heat. All right, Ricky, give me two things that would concern you after the first 2 games.
Okay, so I would say turnovers, ball handling. That's 1. 2, there was that stretch midway through, I want to say between the 3rd and the 4th, when the Pelicans were getting back into it, when the basic crux of the offense was dribble out the clock and hope Duncan can bail you out with a 3. Yeah. That needs to not be a thing. That can't be a style or a habit for us moving forward, because especially if we start funneling the ball into Duncan down the stretch, what they're going to do is they're basically going to know what to take away from us in order to clog up our entire offensive sets. Once we figure out those 2, and that will come with continued reps and comfortability, we're going to have a better idea of what the rotations are going to be, how much Precious is going to play down the stretch, whether or not they might even be able to put Precious and Bam together on some nights. I think we'll start to see some of those issues go away in the coming weeks.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the Precious and Bam playing together because it didn't happen today. It happened only for like half a minute in game one. I thought it might happen today, but one of the things that they're doing, Alex, is using Iguodala a lot as a small ball four, which is something he did a little last year but didn't do quite that much. Again, instead of going to Olynyk, I think you and I kind of agree that I think there's going to be Leonard games and there's going to be Olynyk games. And that might affect the starting lineup because I don't think Kelly's going to start those games. I think Kelly might start Kelly would come off the bench and play 20 minutes, and somebody else, maybe it's Harkless, maybe it's Akpala eventually, is going to end up. Sorry about the mask. They were policing me on this all game because it keeps falling off. But I think that, it's going to be one or the other. I don't think we're going to see a lot of games that both Kelly and Myers play if Iguodala can play a lot of four.
And the other thing too is, I think the way you put it is, I also thought of it like this: 2 out of 3 of Mo, Kelly, and Myers, I think, are going to be playing on any given night, and it'll probably be a matchup thing. Like I think, obviously, we talked about in the pod that it really just made a lot of sense for them to start big in this matchup, and to not have Mo Harkless having to cover Zion. They put Bam to start off on Zion, and even he had a hard time. Like Zion is just, he is. I mean, I don't even know how to describe, like, his physical presence is almost unmatched by anybody in the league. And between him and Steven Adams, like it's got to be the strongest front court. It made a lot of sense for them to go big this time around. But yeah, like I think they got a lot of different ways they can go with, like me and you were talking about, to solve whatever type of problem is out there on the court. And I do still think Iguodala is probably their most trustworthy for it because of the defense that he provides, and just like his offense remains. There's a lot that can. That you can want there still, that he can provide more of. But I think Iguodala is their most 34 on the defensive end.
Jonathan, let's look ahead a little bit. I know people want to come in, so we'll get to some of the comments. Alex, I'm thinking we don't pod. I think we just stay here on the stream a little longer and put this on the pod feed. What do you think? Does it make more sense?
It's all right. It just won't be the same, clean quality.
I don't care.
But I'm good with staying on the stream.
It's Christmas. This is a tactical decision. We make these decisions here on the fly. I think maybe we stick with this. Our
audibles aren't as clean as Tua's.
No, well, definitely not. But yeah. Anyway, Jonathan. So looking ahead to Milwaukee, one of the things that Alex and I had talked about a lot here during the game as we were sitting next to each other, over in 124, is that again, it's going to be game to game. So you look at Milwaukee's lineup: Brook Lopez, Giannis, Middleton, Drew Holiday, and I guess DiVincenzo is playing as the other guard right now. Do you stay with the Myers-Leonard big lineup here against them and let Bam take Giannis?
I would prefer that, but I think what would probably be happening is, since Brook Lopez is more of a stretch five where he'll stay outside, he's not banging in the center, and then Giannis is really their main, guy who's going to try to take it in the paint. I can see us going small again, where we'll try Harkless out. Spo didn't really play Harkless today, so it was interesting to see him give him the keys in the first game and then take him back in the second one. What I would prefer to see is Myers-Leonard. He came out, he was more willing to take the shot, and he just looked really well, especially since we had better defense up front helping him out. So I would prefer Myers coming in because I think that would give the Heat a better chance just to stay big and match up with them with the shooting as well, because you have two slow-footed centers with Lopez and Myers just kind of matching up with each other, and then everything else will come in. But I do think we have something really good in Precious, that somebody who can guard Giannis just as well as Jay did last year. So that's going to be really fun to see if Precious ends up on Giannis and see how he matches up.
I think that one of the – yes, thank you, Richard. Okay, we'll stay here. The $2 convinced me. We appreciate it. But that's the thing about Precious, though, is I was concerned about how much playing time a rookie could get. But Alex and I were going through some of the draft lists. There's very few rookies, very few guys in the first round who the Heat could have plugged to play right away. Like, if you look at a lot of the guys, because of the no summer league and all that stuff, it had to be a very specific kind of player. And here's the weird thing to me about it. Every team in the league talked about, we need to find a Bam big. We need to find a Bam big. We need to find somebody like that. And then they literally let the Bam big drop to the Heat in 20. Okay? Like, that's remarkable to me. Like, that now looking back at it, I know none of us were calling Precious to the Heat on that day. But the fact that he was able, basically the prototype 2 slips to the Heat because 19 other teams didn't take him. I mean, that to me, that's one of the big stories of the season early for the Heat, is that you've got to, how many rookies have contributed to the Heat right away over the recent years? I mean, Winslow came off the bench. Richardson had to go to the G League. right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And
And
obviously
that came
we
off
saw
the
Hero
bench
and
too.
Nunn last year, and Robinson was kind of a rookie, but it is unusual in their history. And to get a guy who fits so perfectly, to me, the two best stories of the season so far, the way Goran Dragic looks and the way Precious has jumped in. And this is going to allow Jimmy Butler to get his legs under him because even in the first half, ankle or no ankle, okay, he looks rusty because he didn't play the 2 preseason games. He doesn't look like himself on offense, Ricky.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, absolutely. Not only that, I think we also need to talk about this openly for sure. The fact that Bam Adebayo, there were moments in that game where, quite frankly, watching as a fan, I think it would have been a great time for him to have taken over. I think we need to be very upfront and honest about the fact that we are paying him a max contract now, and he has all the talent in the world to really take over. And I'm not just talking about Game 6 versus the Celtics. We mentioned this before during the game. I believe it was Game 4 against Milwaukee when we had the chance to sweep them. And Bam was putting up monster numbers like 36 and 15 and 16. But in the latter parts of the fourth quarter and overtime, he stopped looking at the basket. That's not when, those are moments when we need him to really take us home. And I think he'll learn that, but I think it's time to start transitioning that mentality away from simply being a system player, as we mentioned before, but as the leader of this team. Because right now, as far as I'm concerned, he's the most talented, best player on this team, and he needs to take over. That's what I'm hoping for, at least.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think I tweeted that. I think the progression that Bam needs to make this year, again, is from thinking he's a really good player in the Heat system to sometimes breaking the system, right? To sometimes making a decision that he's going to take over games. We saw it in the Washington game last year when there was nobody else. We saw it in the playoffs against Boston. But he's got to take over. I mean, there were times, we're watching him right here. He's not looking at the rim. And the other thing Alex and I noticed today was they ran less offense through him than they typically do. They ran much more of especially when Dragic was on the floor, traditional point guard offense, ball in Goran's hands. That was a lot of what they did today, whereas that's not traditionally what they do. Alex, you're on the Zooms?
Yeah, so I'm on the Spo Zoom right now. But yeah, I mean, everything you said, like I thought they ran a lot of the Goran Bam pick and roll, which was obviously something they went to a lot during the playoffs and was really successful. The point where they just kept, seeing it coming, I think. And Bam wasn't really looking to create. And I don't think those plays were meant for him. But I thought it was weird, like especially after Jimmy came out of the game and you needed some more creation. And it was just mostly coming out of Goran's hands all the time, which, I love Goran. But part of what made their offense so special is the amount of options and variety that they had. And I think also they needed to do a better job of setting up their shooters. I think Bam is, obviously really, really good at that. So, I thought they should have got the ball in his hands more, especially after Jimmy left the game. Like, he's your other max player, and he's such a great initiator at the 5. I think that's something that they're going to end up going back to more often. It was weird tonight, though.
Yeah, I mean, Bam's numbers ended up pretty good, but again, I don't feel the impact that you feel from him in certain games. And I do still feel like I was a little surprised. I turned to Alex in the fourth quarter. I said, Goran's only played 21 minutes. It felt like more than that, but I still feel like they're putting too much on Goran. Like, you don't want to be doing this early in the season, first half of the year, where Dragic has to, play even into the high 20s. I'd rather he be sort of the low to mid 20s. And then additionally, where he has to initiate the offense every single time. As good as he looks, as well as he's come off of the foot injury, you want to preserve him. He's your key piece off the bench for the playoffs. He's the guy that you can put with Avery Bradley or with Iguodala or with Precious, and whatever offensive limitations they have, he makes up for it because he can create. You don't want a situation where he's broken down by February. Like that, I think they got to be careful with that. And that's why it is important that some possessions that Bam just takes the ball and goes. And I think we focus so much on the mid-range jumper with him, and that looks much more comfortable. If there's one thing I want to see him do offensively, it's just when he has a defender on him who cannot guard him, and he had that a bunch today, put the ball on the deck, get to the basket, get the 2 fouls. 2 foul shots. He can do that consistently. I didn't see it as much today. I thought he was good defensively, but to me, what is remarkable is Bam comes off the floor, Precious comes on the floor, and they're not losing anything. I mean, they're literally going from a rookie playing from a max player to a rookie playing in his second game, and they played as well with Precious on the – and that's not a slight to Bam. It's remarkable what they've been able to do with Precious so far.
I mean, to me, that makes the Heat special. Like being able to have a mobile big on the floor at all times. And look, that obviously gets negated a little bit when you're playing Bam or Precious next to Kelly or Myers, because they're not – essentially Bam and Precious become the four. So that's not the special part. But if they, for example, are both fives – being that mobile, like that is a real unique quality for the Heat to have that other teams don't have. Like they just don't. It's a lot of these teams, a lot of bigs are, they're good players, but they're stiff. And I think that's something that's teams are going to start kind of honing in on more, is being able to target these mobile bigs, because to me, that's like, there's so much motion and ball movement happening in the modern game. Mm-hmm. Where to me, I think you need somebody like a Bam or Precious who can move around all over the floor and cover different spots and switch all over the place if they have to. And I think clearly the Heat knew what they were doing with this pick.
Yeah, and apparently 19 other teams didn't, because I'm just in terms of fit for a system and everything else. It's looking like Precious is going to be a much better pick than guys who went above him. Let's address the other elephant in the room while people are talking about elephants in the room. The KZ Okpala thing. There will be Heat fans who come out of 15-point win today and are upset that Okpala didn't play. I feel like he's the new Michael Beasley in that sense. And I get it to a certain degree because he teased in the preseason. But what is your thought? I'll start with Alex on this. What is your thought on why Spo hasn't gone to him in the first two games? I mean, even today, he could have gone to him over Harkless when Jimmy was out and maybe gotten a little bit more offensive creation or a little bit better three-point shooter and didn't. What do you think he's waiting for?
Well, I mean, I kind of have been saying for the past few months that I didn't have my expectations set where KZ was going to be part of the rotation. But then the way that he showed out versus Toronto in the preseason kind of, I think, helped change everybody's minds. And especially, after seeing him get a solid rotation spot for 2 straight games there. And even with, me supposedly having no expectations, I was still disappointed when they brought in Mo over KZ. And just like everybody else, everybody threw a hissy fit on Twitter when Mo Harkless came in the game. The guy is a veteran, and we know Spo is going to go with the veteran first. He's going to give him a little bit of time before he turns to KZ. Like, they got 12 guys they want to play. Right. They got 12 guys they want to play. Kendrick Nunn made all rookie first team and was like second in rookie of the year voting last year. Did not play a single minute tonight. And we know why. But, I just think it's give it a little bit more time. I think KZ will eventually get in the rotation here. It's just going to take a while. Like, I thought Mo played solid defense tonight. But you already know how I feel about this. I think KZ could probably give you very similar defense, and he could probably give you more stuff on offense. Like, I trust his shooting and his handle more than Mo.
Let's talk about Nunn for a second, though, because, again, the point is, if you go back to the beginning of last season, the first 3 weeks of the year, he was averaging 19 points. He was putting up rookie numbers that were comparable to what Dwayne Wade did as a rookie. And now he's completely out of the rotation, doesn't play in the second game. Are there spots, though, Ricky, that you think will make sense for him? Because when Bradley's defending like that, it's hard to take him off the floor. But also, watching Bradley try to create offensively is a bit of an adventure. We know that Nunn is capable of that. Hero is struggling now, similar to what Nunn struggled in the bubble, and I don't think the Heat are going to give up on Hero, and they shouldn't. But where do you see a role for Ken? Again, if he's still here, where do you see because he's not helping? He's not helping his trade value right now, obviously, but he's not playing. What do you see the role as for him?
Well, okay, so it's very clear that we have a lot of our fans, Heat fans, talking about how much KZ needs to be freed. And here's the thing: I'm with Alex. We have a lot of guys ahead. Like, let me give you an example with a certain stretch in the game where it was real kind of touch and go. We weren't sure how far it was going to sway. I thought the Pels were set for a huge run. We had, I believe, on the floor at one point, we had Goran, Avery Bradley, Andre Iguodala, Precious, and Duncan Robinson. Mm-hmm. Based on who they are, what they've done, and what we needed at the time, there was no room for KZ to play during that stretch. Mm-hmm. There were a couple moments there where, we were getting, there was stoppage of play for fouls and things like that. But I don't think Spo wanted to disrupt the rhythm of some of those players at that time, because during that particular stretch, we were working ourselves into a certain kind of defensive rhythm where Avery really started to make things difficult for really started to make things difficult for Redick. Duncan was starting to get his shot back a little bit. Goran was attacking. Precious was starting to wake up. Iggy was providing a lot of veteran leadership on the floor that would have otherwise been needed in that situation. So for situations like that, for someone like Tyler Hero, Avery Bradley, guys like that, they're going to have their moment. But for KZ, at least, his time will come. We just need patience. And eventually the rhythm will return for guys like Hero and some of the other guys. But that's just the way it's got to be sometimes. I know Spo can be kind of stubborn with his rotation sometimes, especially when things start to go a little bit well. But I mean, I can't really fault him for that, especially that stretch.
Let's get to the next topic here, because we got our guy Clutch on our strings, talking when the Heat were going through offensive droughts, talking about this is why they need Harden. I think it's a little bit unfair on a game that they really didn't have Jimmy effective for the first half and didn't have him for the entire game. But also we're talking about having a lot of playable players. And so let's address this elephant in the room. Would the Heat benefit from a trade to consolidate some of these pieces to get a star, Jonathan? Because it does seem like they've got 11 or 12 playable guys. It's going to be night to night. I think I've said all along, I think they can win with this team. I also think they could win with James Harden. Okay, so it's not like I say they're going to get James Harden, they're not going to win. They're going to win either way. It's just I would rather watch them try to win this way than watch isolation ball for 23 seconds. Okay, that's my personal preference. All right, but looking at these first couple games now, do you think the Heat would be more inclined to try to make a consolidation trade again to bring in a star? Because you look at some of the guys that were going to be traded to Houston and the offers we've talked about. Duncan's not included. Precious is not included at the moment. You're talking about KZ didn't play tonight until the very end. Nunn didn't play. Olynyk didn't play. So really the only two who did play that we believe are on the table are Hero and Iguodala. Right? And I think most Heat fans would say you trade Hero and Iguodala and picks to get Harden. So I've been the dissenting voice on this, but I'll give voice to somebody else. What do you think?
Yeah, I think if you're able to keep Duncan and you're able to keep Precious, this trade is something that you definitely should pursue. I think maybe what they're doing is they're trying to raise the value of Iguodala a little bit, because last year his value was more not as much on the scoreboard. It was more what he was doing in the game. So for Iguodala, I think they might be trying to raise his value, showing that he can lead this young team. Because if Houston wants to become younger and they want to get young assets, they're going to want somebody that can lead this young team and create.
But Jonathan, I'll stop you. He didn't want to do that in Memphis, right? He balked at that in Memphis. So I almost kind of think Andre's value at this stage is either to a contender like the Heat in limited action or his contract. I think in this circumstance where he's got other veteran guys and he thinks he can win, he'll be a mentor. But he didn't want to be a mentor in Memphis to John Morant and to those guys, right?
Yeah, you're 100% right. So that completely scratched every point I just made. But but yeah, you're right. So now thinking about that, yeah, that makes sense. But if we're able to give up everybody minus Duncan and Precious, we saw what they brought to the game today. Out of all the young guys, those were the two that had the most upside with them, because Hero struggled. We didn't really see KZ. We didn't really see Nunn. We don't know because KZ had that injury issue a little bit all throughout, lingering through last year. So what happens if he comes in and in game action, he gets hurt? And teams already don't want to look at him because he has an injury history. So saving him, making sure that he's fully healthy for a trade, I think that might be what's keeping KZ out, just so they can keep him healthy. And that's why they're trying to feature Tyler Hero is to make sure that he gets as much value as possible, and then everything around him will try to figure out. But I think for the Heat, if you're able to get him without giving up Duncan or Precious, you do that 10 out of 10 times.
All right, Alex, Ricky, we're going to close here, okay? I'll just throw this at you guys. What would you do with the Tyler Hero situation? Because Sedano was texting me during the game, and then he went on Twitter with it, so I had to go at him on Twitter about it, that basically if it was up to him, he'd put Hero on the bench and start Bradley. Doesn't think he's ready for the role, doesn't think he gives him enough defensively. I'm on the other side of this. I say you let him play through it. I think they need the third shot creator in the starting lineup. Bradley's not that. I think Bradley can play the minutes to pick up for Hero when he's not playing well. Go to you first, Ricky. What do you do with Tyler Hero?
I think we stay the course. I think we remember that this was a kid who dropped, I think it was 35 or 37 points in a big playoff game. I think we keep in mind that Tyler Hero, like any player, especially at his age, has his ups and downs. I think we continue with him. He will work his way through it. and we'll just keep it going. I think Avery Bradley right now is best served as like a defensive spark plug off the bench. Tyler Hero is the guy we're going to invest in. And I don't think it would do very well, be it from optics or even for the player's confidence, to bench him after a couple tough games this early in the season. This is a marathon and not a sprint. So I think that if we keep going with Tyler, he will work his way through it. He's a focused kid, and he's very confident in his abilities. We keep going. I think everything should work out for the best.
Alex, last word to you.
Yeah, I'm pretty much on the same stance. I think you got to keep Tyler in the starting lineup. You know, I'm not against bringing him off the bench. Like, I think him off the bench with Goran and Precious would be just an absolutely deadly bench lineup. Not to mention, Andre and Kelly or something like that. But regardless, I think he should be the starter. I think he does have what it takes to be there. Like, Kendrick Nunn was a starter there all year, and he's ahead of Nunn in every way, as a shooter, as a playmaker. And I'm not trying to be hard on Nunn. I'm just saying I think he definitely fits there. I will say, not to give him any excuses, he has been up and down. I will say, though, in both of these games in the regular season, he has had some tough defensive backcourts checking him. I think Lonzo did an incredible job today. Like, I think he was hounding him, especially in the second half. Like, he was just absolutely hounding guys. Bledsoe is obviously a very good defender, and they're starting the both of them together. So I think that had part of what to do with it. And, the Magic have a very lengthy defensive backcourt, like we talked about on the pod. So I think it's going to get better from here on now, and you definitely got to give him the reps. Don't go backwards, and just try to see what you have with Hero and how he fits in, especially with Duncan, Jimmy, and Bam, who are your core guys. You got to see how all four of them work together.
All right, that's Alex Toledo. Follow him at Tropical Blanket. Follow Jonathan at 3-Piece Combo. Also follow Ricky. Hopefully you left me on mute today, Alex, so I didn't end up on Spolster's calls. I appreciate that. I'm still hearing about that. And follow at Ricky J. Mark on Twitter. I don't know if we're going to pod today. I don't think we're going to pod. We'll come back with pods before the Milwaukee game coming up next week.
It's too cold in here, man. No pods.
Sunday night. Yeah, we're going home. I'm going home.
It's freezing in this arena.
Beautiful day here. Just give it to me one time, Alex. You got to close with that slogan.
At the end of the day, I'm getting out of here with no traffic.
All right, sounds good. So am I. Have a good day, everybody.